who live in secluded towns, what is the darkest thing that happened in your town, but is kept secret? In the early 1990s, a town in my small county in the southern US had a fire in a chicken processing plant. When workers tried to escape, it became apparent that the fire exits and other exits had been locked. Dozens of people died around the exits in Desperation in a town of around 2,000. Our state suppressed the investigation due to lobbies, and families received almost none of the compensation funds. Pretty sure there's a song about it. My mom told me this story once that back when she was growing up in a small farming community in Ohio, there was some kind of neighborhood party attended by a bunch of families with kids all around the same age. All the kids, including herself, had this like big slumber party in the basement. They wake up the next morning, and one of the kids is found in the middle of the road, having been hit with a truck, but with his whole body zipped all the way up in his sleeping bag. None of the kids owned up to doing and the adults could never figure it out either. After a while people just started moving on with their lives and everyone pretty much forgot about it. I wouldn't say we live in a secluded town, but when my mother was in school her best friend got a job working for the sheriff. She later came to school and told them that the sheriff had been molesting her. She also began telling people about what they have been using the tunnels under the town for. The police supposedly had been filming child pornography. After that day she never made it home. She was found later naked, hogtied and shot in the back of the head. No one could prove it, and the sheriff had been suspected of many things but nothing ever came of it. They just announced that there was a man seen in a white van abducting people. But her friends knew. Her family knows. This is Red Bluff, California BTW. The tunnels were originally used by Chinese immigrants. They go through our main street and through Rio Street. They lead to houses and some businesses, but they have been condemned. There are sensors down there though, so if you get in the police are right there to get you out. Edit the little girl's name was Rachel Ward and the sheriff supposedly responsible was Koenig, but he died years back of old age. In the 80s and early 90s my town was run completely by dirty cops. Drugs were run by the cops and people who didn't do as they were told would go mysteriously missing and eventually, most of them, wind up dead. It took the feds to clean the place up and install a new set of clean cops. Edit. I've been getting a lot of questions about the Copland movie. I've never seen it, but I googled it and no, it's not there. I'm not gonna say the town name of where I'm from, because it's an everyone knows everyone one of town, but I'm from a small town in California and still live there. This all happened before my time, and I was told about it by people who lived through it. My best friend's dad being one of them. A family friend was super drunk. He was walking home and fell unconscious on the road at the bottom of a hill. Another family friend, small town so we all knew each other, was driving home late. He heard a thump and a crunch when he went over a hill. He got out of the car thinking he hit a wallaby or something. He instead found his friend dead. Everyone decided to forget what he did because it really wasn't his fault. There was no way he could have seen him asleep at the bottom on the hill in the middle of the road. It was at such an angle that the headlights didn't spot him. It's a bit weird this has come up because I drove past a super drunk dude just a few hours ago on my way home from work. He was drunk and stumbling on the road. He fell over and lost a thong. Flip-flop to you Americans. I called the police and told them. They said they'd pick him up and take him home where he would be safe. Didn't want a repeat of what happened back in my hometown to happen to that random drunk guy. It's still happening in my town. This specific event happened directly in my gated neighborhood. A member of a Russian gang got his house shot up before they went inside to finish the job. My wife saw them drag out the body. Organized crime bosses live in my town and the two neighboring towns. I live in NJ. Edit. Jetin asked a lot about where exactly. Milburn, Westfield, Short Hills, Springfield. I live in one of those towns. That's all I feel comfortable saying lol. Not far from where my parents grew up is the town of Skidmore, Missouri, which is honestly a supremely fucked up place of weird sinister stuff. The most commonly known incident is from the 1980s when Ken McElroy was shot to death while sitting in his truck with his wife in front of the pool hall in town in broad daylight. There were dozens of witnesses who saw the shooting, which came from multiple firearms, but they denied seeing the shooting, or who may have been responsible. The news stories from the time sort of painted McElroy as a town bully, almost like Biff from Back to the Future, except he was a fucking violent monster who had beaten, figuratively and literally, over a dozen charges including theft, rape of a minor, remember his wife, yep, she was one of the no rape victims, and carried Ken's child at 14, and other general violent acts. Leading up to his town-sanctioned execution, he had the gall to appeal a 2-year sentence for shooting a geriatric grocer in the neck with a shotgun and nearly decapitated him. So, why did he do it? Because the grocer asked Ken's daughter to put back a piece of candy she hadn't paid for. People appeared fed up with this rampaging 6'5", 270-pound thug who thought he could get away with rape and wanton violence. So somebody or a group of somebodies shot him at least twice and emptied quite a few rounds into his truck. No witnesses, and even his wife who was in the truck refused to identify the shooter or shooters. Over the summer there was a guy found hanging from a tree on the sheriff's property. The sheriff disliked this young man and treated him poorly during his incarceration at the county jail. Many witnesses said that the day he got released from jail, the sheriff invited him to his secluded property and told him he could help him get back on his feet. 2 days later, a couple of teenage boys fishing in a creek discovered the guy hanging in a tree. Authorities was notified, no investigation was done, and it was immediately ruled a suicide. This boy was a known drug addict with no family or friends, so there was really no one to press the issue. The local news wrote a small article on man found dead from apparent suicide, and then it was hush hush after that. It's just one of those things we will never know. The daughter of divorced parents was raped to death by the mother's boyfriend. She was 6. Her father was contacting CPS and presenting evidence that the man was abusing his daughter under her mother's care. Nothing was done about it until she was life-flighted to Salt Lake, where she died of her wounds, and early in the investigation the mother admitted to letting her boyfriend play with her. The worst part is that because the abuser/murderer was part of the tribe, all he had to do was stay on tribal lands to not be taken into custody. So while the long process of an FBI investigation and the FBI jumping the correct hoops to make an arrest on tribal land, this man walked freely as long as he was on the reservation. Most people rejected the abuser/murderer entirely, but what hurt more is seeing the people who went out of their way to help him. His family tried to open a food truck where the highway passes through the res, so he could have a job. It earned a large protest considering the size of the town, and few out-of-towners stopped for tacos, so they fortunately had to shut down. The man's cousin was chief, so he was given a job in the dispensary. Some other members of the tribe who worked there walked out on the job and went to the council to try and stop it. Fortunately, as of now, the FBI has taken the mother and boyfriend into custody and they're awaiting trial. I've been called for jury duty twice now, and it's been cancelled each time. There was a sheriff in my town in rural Louisiana, and he was sheriff for about 40 years. Well, our parish at the time, when he was sheriff, had the highest rate for meth production and weed production in the state. There was this one particular meth dealer that was never arrested, but somehow someone on the other side of the parish would get raided and a bunch of people go to jail, but never him, as it turns out is a relative of the sheriff. That sheriff let meth and the money it generated control our parish for decades, while he slowly got rich, bought a big house, new cars, and always got re-elected. Even though all the locals knew about this, no one cares, cause he was a good man or his family has been here since all the old families founded this town, or better, is he just a good old sheriff who keeps the drugs out of our parish? What's really sad is some corrupt public officials will use a person's meth addict family members as voter suppression or leverage in elections. About 50 to 60 years ago, my neighbor's grandfather chased away all minorities from our village. He set their houses on fire and destroyed the properties they left behind, so they never came back. There are very few minorities in my village to this day. Even tough, that guy is long dead. His grandson is married to the only doctor here, and he's a great neighbor. Eater, this got way more attention than I expected, so I'll try to clarify some things. This happened in Hungary and I don't know of any other similar cases here. The towns nearby have noticeably more minorities, and it got me thinking, why our village has only 2 gypsy families. When I asked my grandma about this, she told me this story, but little else about it. She asked me not to tell this to anyone, because only the elders know about it and some of them deny it ever happened. Apparently my neighbor's grandfather, let's call him Jay, was one of the loudest against the minorities, mostly gypsies, and he decided they had to go. So one night he set their houses on fire and they left. To be fair, I highly doubt this was done by a single person over just one night. It's important to note that my grandmother was a child when this all happened, so she might remember some details wrongly, and since nobody has ever talked about Jay's attack I can't confirm what exactly happened. I for myself think that 20 to 30 families can't be thrown out like this over past, so there are definitely some things that just don't add up. I hope this helps to understand it all a bit better, and feel free to ask more.